there. Welcome back to the Complicated Kids podcast. I'm your host, Gabriele Nicolet. I'm a toddler whisperer, a speech therapist, and a parent coach. And today I have Madeline Lauf. Madeline, welcome.
Hello, hello.
You are, I'll just tell the good people, the founder of Begin Health, which tell us a little bit about what is Begin Health and why do you care about it so much?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for having me. Really excited to talk about kids' health. Begin Health is a kids' health platform, and we help kids with nutritional interventions that achieve health outcomes. And we've started with kids' digestive health because we realize that that is really the center of our overall lifelong health. And the reason I got into this was really because, I'm from the Midwest and I grew up around just unfortunately poor eating habits. There was a lot of processed foods. You see a lot of obesity. School lunches were totally devastating. And you start to wonder, like, why are we sick as a nation? And it turns out it's really because of where it all begins, the building blocks, and that starts with our nutrition and our first foods. And I got really interested specifically in kids' health is because that is the greatest opportunity for impact. If we can help kids build healthy eating patterns and habits from an early age, we have the greatest opportunity to build strong, healthy kids for lifelong resilient health. So I'm really passionate about solving this crisis. And I think that the greatest opportunity to do that is by preventing illness rather than treating it after we're already sick.
Which is such it's an emerging field, I think. So let's just be clear up front that this field is kind of in would you say it's in its infancy, its toddlerhood, what?
I would say toddlerhood. I
Okay.
think we, as a nation, have started to wake up. Even starting this company 5 years ago, I think there was a lot more hesitancy. There was a lot more. I'm so sorry. Not expecting the mailman to just show up and
Oh,
my dog. I'm so sorry.
no, it's fine.
Okay, so I would say that the general consensus here is that more and more people are aware. Millennial parents are totally understanding what is happening on labels. They are reading them, they are being discerning, and now they're translating that as millennials become parents to what is going on with their kids. And they're becoming a lot more vocal and demanding companies create better solutions for their kids, or just, more discerning again with what's going into their kids' diet, how the family meals are being made. And so generally, I would say that we are now more and more awake to all of these things, but we still have a long way to go. And part of what you're seeing, which is just so great, is actually corporates starting to take these hints that they need to change because the consumer is demanding it. You see this with some of the corporations phasing out, for example, certain dyes or use of certain ingredients that we know aren't super helpful that are banned potentially in the European Union. And so now we are starting here in America to finally make those changes. And I think that we do have a long way to go, but starting is the most important piece.
It's interesting. I saw on Instagram where one gets all of one's information. I've seen a couple of these now where they listed like the ingredients of Oreos in 1981, which is when I was eating them, and the ingredients in Oreos in 2025. And it is like the one has nothing to do with the other. Like there maybe two common ingredients are wheat and sugar, but everything else is completely different. And that's, I think, a little bit what you're speaking to here in terms of when we talk about ultra processed foods. We're actually not even talking about the same kinds of foods that were created in the 80s and the 70s and before, like when this movement took hold. Do I have that right?
Yes, no, I think it's exactly right. It's twofold. One is the food here that we recognize today, like you're saying, the Oreos, the cornflakes, those types of ingredients that, again, even when we were growing up and I was growing up in the 90s, are dramatically different than they are today. In fact, actually, I was on eBay the other day trying to find, like a Wheaties box from the 90s to see if I could buy one to compare. And really is dramatically different. And unfortunately, I think, as an economist here, I believe that it's not really necessarily a nefarious thing. It's all driven by incentives, right? And
Yeah.
those ingredients today, if you can find opportunities to improve your margin on a product and you can have a substituted ingredient that is lower cost and it still does the job, then you're going to, as a company, you will make that trade-off because nobody is holding you accountable. And I think in the European Union, for example, some of those ingredients are actually just banned. So they're not even able to formulate with some of those ingredients. And so that's why you don't see them over there necessarily. I think there is hope here, though, is that without even necessarily being banned, which I'm always on the side of I would prefer not having to ban, but I would hope that companies would just do the right thing. I think that the customer is demanding a change. And I think that is what is so important because customers are now vocal and supporting better options. And so through the market economy, I hope that we will have better solutions.
And so back to kind of the way that processed foods are processed. And you talked about, health outcomes, one of which is obesity. What are some other things? You mentioned constipation before we started recording, but what are some other things that we see in children that are related to gut dysbiosis?
Yeah. Great. So, and that's, so important is this whole concept of our gut microbiome. I think more and more people are aware. You hear a lot more companies talking about what is the gut microbiome. It is what the viruses, the bacteria, everything that lives inside of us that is responsible for so many different positive functions in our health. And we live symbiotically with these bugs. And we want to feed and support and grow the good bugs and make sure that we keep the bad bugs at bay or we get rid of them if we can. And so for kids' health, this is what is so cool is that as we're developing as kids, we're developing alongside us a gut microbiome. And, really there's many different stages that go into the building blocks of our gut microbiome, one of which is your method and mode of birth. So if you were born via C-section, which by the way, we know C-sections are on the rise, almost a third of all births are C-section. And while they are life-saving, they can also have other consequences. For example, the kiddo might not be able to be seeded through the vaginal canal with the positive gut bugs. So all of a sudden, that could lead to imbalances later on in life because the kiddo was exposed to the hospital environment bacteria that can be more pathogenic, which you do see those kids sometimes express these symptoms in allergies or different health issues like that. So we have C-section births.
I'm
Yeah,
going
go
to
ahead.
pause for just a second because for some of our audience, this is being like that phenomenon of being burned by sea, which again, saving lives. So no shade, but just recognition. Often in the case of the audience, there are issues related to either developmental things that are identified before the child is born, or like prematurity, for example, is another compounding factor in terms of like how developed are your tissues, and do they have the lining? Do they have the right amount of porousness or the right amount of where the junctions are really tight? And so some of that gets set up very early on if you're premature. And then antibiotics use, which I'm sure you're going to talk about.
Yeah, you named it. So we have the C-section birth, then we have, your first food. And I got very interested in infant formula at the beginning of my company because it is our first food if you are not breastfeeding, right? And breast milk is uniquely built for humans. There's nothing more, beautiful and nature derived than breast milk. And a lot of times now we're seeing the kids that are not breastfed as long as historically we were, that helped feed and nourish those good gut bugs. And a lot of to the infant formulas, I would say discredit, it's not, they're trying to be as close to breast milk, but they will never, at least until there's more innovation, they are not breast milk, right? So the kid is really not nourishing their gut bugs the way that they could. And now The positive thing is that there are more innovations that are trying to bridge that gap. At Begin Health, we do offer one of those, a human milk oligosaccharide, because we know how important it's the leading prebiotic in breast milk. And so the more and more that we can nourish kids, again, at that stage, as they move into solid foods, that is an important key to developing the gut. A couple other, as you absolutely mentioned, antibiotic use can really throw kind of a wrench in all of this, because we know, again, antibiotics, they're life-saving if you have an issue, but we do sometimes see the overuse of antibiotics. And antibiotics are exactly what they say. They are like anti-life. So that means they are killing all of the bugs, the bad bugs, which is good, but they also kill the good bugs. And so it's imperative that if you are experiencing a round of antibiotics, that you on the back end start to also feed those good gut bugs to rebuild that population. And so, yeah, go ahead.
Well, and if you're talking about an infant, right, whose system doesn't know how it's calibrated yet. I mean, you're dealing with a very new organism. And then if we've got, I mean, plenty of kids at birth, mom is given antibiotics because she's having a C, and kid is given antibiotics because they're at risk for whatever. And so we're like essentially wiping the slate clean in a way that isn't helpful going forward. And I just want, for the sake of for the audience, can you talk about like what are some effects, again, besides obesity, constipation we listed here, like what are the effects of gut dysbiosis? Like what happens when we have a gut that is not in an optimal shape that we want it to be in?
There are so many digestive, immune, neurological, everything is truly connected. We call it the command center of the growing little body because it has so many functions. And so digestive health is one of them. That's one of the key traits that you can see, oh, there could be something wrong, whether it's in the stooling pattern, whether it's just in discomfort, gas, bloating, anything related to the digestive system. You have other challenges like eczema that present in the skin that can also be because of those challenges in the gut, right? And then we also have other, even beyond all of this, allergies. More and more prominence of allergies are occurring. A lot of times the kids that, if you are sampling the stool of the kids with the allergies, they are missing some of the positive gut microbes that help other kids, not have the allergies. We're seeing also asthma is another one. So just the general rise in chronic illnesses, obesity, actually overweight and being underweight. One of the interesting things when it comes to being underweight is the bugs, they almost have like their own neurotransmitters, if you will, and they demand the bad foods. And so they are asking, they are the ones that are asking for the processed foods or the foods that help proliferate them. And so when you don't feed them, they actually get starved out. And so a lot of times, families who have picky eaters, you're like, my kid just doesn't like broccoli. It's like, well, it's not really that he doesn't like broccoli. It's like his bugs want, pasta and bread and all of those other types of foods that are feeding the bad bugs, right? So I think, there's a lot happening here and we know it's complicated, but the goal here is how can we always, as families, focus on feeding the positive gut bugs and removing the bad bugs by just cutting off their source of food, which is typically like sugar and some of those processed foods that we're not always happy for our kids to eat.
Yeah. So those are, I mean, I'm so glad that you listed kind of, that's like the primary set of stuff that happens when your gut is unhappy. There's a whole secondary set, which is developmental delays and differences, attentional delays and differences, academic delays and differences, mood delays and differences, and immune system function, which you alluded to allergies, but kids who have gut dysbiosis, which is what we're talking about, right? Where you don't have enough of the good bugs and you have too many of the bad bugs. Those kids get sick a lot.
Yeah.
Every little virus that passes through, now they've got it. But I've gotten really used to, and maybe you can speak to this and let me know if you can't, but really used to the families that I work with whose kids by and large again have developmental delays and differences saying, "Oh, all kids get sick."
Yeah.
And I think that that is a common narrative right now because so many children have gut issues, but I also don't think that that has to be true. Do you have some information you can share?
So what I know is that the general consensus is a healthy gut microbiome for the developing years is really predominated by a bacteria called bifidobacteria. And the bifidobacteria, that's the good gut bugs, you get them from yogurt and you can get that, if you can get the good bacteria from foods, we generally share with our families that that is how you want to build your gut microbiome is through nutrition. What are you feeding those good gut bugs? But what you're seeing is that some of those, as you're saying, the dysbiosis tends to lead to more cold and flu in this population, right? And a lot of the studies that actually do study, say, like the 3 to 6 year old range, is that if you feed the good gut bugs, which happen to be bifidobacteria, the incidence of cold and flu in the kids between the ages of 3 and 6 actually were fewer than those that were not. And so, we know that from studies, and then just generally, absolutely, like if your gut is strong, resilient, you will either A, get over cold and flu faster, or B, just not even get it at all. And I think that is really something that's special for especially this age grade or age range.
Yeah, and I think it's so interesting because when we're talking about like mood issues in kids, like really what we're talking about is they're cranky, right? And they cry a lot and they whine a lot because they don't feel good. And
Yes.
so like when parents are trying to put this into perspective, I just want to like flag that like kids don't by and large come and say, "Hey, I had all those pancakes yesterday and today I feel kind of foggy and bloated." No, they'll just act like little shits. And so, right, like we have to almost, I'm happy that we're having this conversation because forewarned is forearmed, right? When parents know, okay, I could see signs of constipation. I could see signs of like mood issues, where my kid is really cranky and really whiny. Why? Oh, wow, we ate this, whatever we ate yesterday. Oh, wow, over time. I'll never forget this. We went traveling with my then 4-year-old and he didn't poop for 4 days. And I was like, who is this monster? And he was, mostly healthy, but he was constipated for 4 days. He was behaving like a completely different child. And so just like knowing that and being on the lookout, because I don't think that by and large we examine the way that children behave as regards their physical health, except if they have a fever or if they're pulling on their ear. And
No,
so,
I think,
yeah.
to add on that, one of the things that we're seeing more and more of is this rise in ADHD in kids, right? Now they're saying, I think 1 in 9 kids has ADHD, and the standard of care is some kind of medication that I really don't even care to go down that path, right? But it's like, why are kids struggling to be attentive at school? Is it because they have ADHD? Or to your point, maybe they are just generally irritable, they're uncomfortable because of they had sugary meal at breakfast and now they got to school and they are just in a bad mood, or it impacts those neurological uh, conditions in these kids. And so that does impact then their schoolwork and their ability to focus and how they treat others. And so this is also something that down the line even can impact sleep, right? Is your kiddo getting a great night's sleep, or is it actually poor and broken sleep because they are uncomfortable or they're backed up or what have you? So I think just generally, it's just so important to be mindful of what is happening with your kid's gut microbiome and the greatest way, in my opinion, to find out is what does the report card of your stool look like daily? And can you tell something from their stool? It is telling you what the kiddo might need more of, more fiber in the diet, or maybe more hydration? Does it look like it was essentially too many days that were in the colon instead of more hydrated, which means that it's moving through the kiddo faster. So there's just so many different just understandings that you can pull from just seeing that, which I know if you have an older kid, it might be harder to do, but certainly in the toddler years, parents can use that as a guide.
Yeah, and listen, parents are intimately acquainted with poop, right? And it's true that we should be aware of the quality of our children's stool, and because it does tell us something about health. And then, of course, if we're going to go one step further, because we've got an extremely picky eater, or we've got somebody who's chronically constipated, or a child who's got chronic eczema, or who has a mood disorder, then we want to do a stool sample and we want to send it to somebody who can analyze it and tell us what's going on. And that's where, like, I'm kind of excited that I get to send people. I wish it were covered by insurance. I wish we were a little bit further along in the science so that we knew more, because this is not, and I want to be really clear here, and you can back me up, but this is a bit of a rabbit hole still. I think there are some operating principles, but I also think bioindividuality is a thing. And so, we're not just handing, I assume that you are not just handing out a product and saying, this will fix everything about you.
I'm sorry, Gabrielle.
Oh,
I think you cut out there for a minute. I don't know what's going on with my internet over here, but
totally fine. I'm just saying
yeah,
this is an emerging field.
yes, it's
It's
emerging.
a rabbit hole. We have to pay attention, is my point.
Yes, and I do want to be clear. It's like we have so much more to learn about the gut microbiome. Every single microbiome is unique, and we call that the gut print. And so your gut print is going to be unique to everyone else, and we are starting to understand more and more about certain strains within the gut microbiome. But what we're not yet really fully aware of is how they all work together. And the composition overall. And I think that's a really exciting emerging field that we have more and more to study. But I think overall, when we know that we can nourish ourselves in positive ways by, at the minimum, removing things that we know are unhealthful, we can make a great stride forward.
And so let's just give people a list. What are some things that we know are unhealthful and
Yes.
unhelpful?
Unhelpful and unhelpful. Oh man, the list is so much. I would say the number one recommendation I always have for families is you do need to audit your grocery list and what is going in your cart. Read the ingredients. If you are seeing things like palm oil, soy oils, canola oils, which is unfortunately prevalent in most processed foods, then you need to find something else, make it on your own if you can, or of course try to find a substitute, right? But please remove these bad ingredients. So you see this a lot also in like the frozen food category. Say you're making nuggets at home, you're tired, you just want to do something frozen, but it's like, look, chicken nuggets are great. I eat chicken nuggets, actually. I do make them, I bake them myself, but what are these ingredients that are going in there? And can we find something that might be a little bit more healthful?
Okay, I want to
So,
stop you there, because many, many families listening to this have children who will only eat one brand of
okay.
chicken nuggets. Okay. And so in solidarity and in sensitivity to those folks, the advice is sound, and we're going to get there more slowly, and we might have some intermediary steps, but it is totally doable. We can absolutely teach your extremely picky eater to transition away from their formerly only reliable food into homemade chicken nuggets, if that's what you want to do, or into something that doesn't have those seed oils in it. So I just wanted to flag that because for all of what you're about to say, the journey is feasible. It just is going to take maybe a little bit more time and a little bit
Yes,
more
it
effort,
doesn't
and that's
happen
fine.
overnight.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes, and even for example, a ketchup, right? There's a reason why the kids like a certain brand of ketchup because there's more sugar in it. Of course, right? So are there other steps to moving towards a cleaner ketchup? And again, I loved your advice of intermediary. So maybe you mix a little of two at once, right? So there are steps, but I would say when you can start to try to transition those ingredients out. There's a lot of other, and they're in like crackers, right? Your cereals, there's just so much, but I think there's a lot of hope. There's a lot of interesting companies out there that are providing, regenerative type of food for kids. I love Serenity
Mm.
Kids, a great brand. I think White Provisions is another brand. Just there are brands out there that are trying to do right by the consumer. And so when you can make those substitutions, I encourage families to do so.
Okay, so seed oils are one. Anything else
Yeah.
like broad categories?
I would say when the dyes, if you can try to remove the dyes happen to be in a lot of candies, on a lot of other even cereals.
Mhm.
If you can remove the cereals, I would encourage that. That's an important one. Sugary drinks is one we try to help families find substitutions. So if you can do fun fruits plus water or something like that, but the sugary drinks is a very hard and category in kids because there's a lot of great marketing meaning just appeals to kids.
Well, let
But
me
we
tell you something about that. That's so interesting to me because my kids, who are grown now, we only ever had water at home.
Mhm.
And and I don't think that this maybe isn't true for everybody, but they would go to a birthday party and be offered a soda or a juice, and they'd be like, "No, have some water." Your
Yeah.
taste buds will accommodate to what you get used to.
Yes.
And so if you get used to sugar, you'll crave the sugar. But if you wean from the sugar, pretty soon, it's actually, I've done it myself. It's pretty quick that your body will recalibrate to like, oh gosh, that's way too sweet,
Yes.
from like this tastes normal.
Yes.
So just, to be aware of that. But again, it's like it's kind of it's what we condition ourselves to at some level.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, for sure. And they've done interesting work where kids from different, I guess, countries who have different palates, they will taste things that are too sweet and they'll expel it because they're like, look, this is it's not used to their palate.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so yeah, but that's another one. So, I think it's hard. It's really hard to be a modern parent. I think the fast food options, I always encourage like find the one that works for you that is approved. Like, sometimes I eat out, but I know what I'm looking for. And
Mhm.
if you're a parent, it's like look for the ones that you would approve of and try to focus on those as solutions when you have to. But of course, when we can try to bulk make food on the weekend for family meal planning throughout the week. Like those are small strategies that you can do so that you can try to opt for the healthier version, so that we are not in a position where it's like you're just in a bind and you have to go for something that you wouldn't actually be that excited to give your kid.
And listen, for all of you who just cringed and died a slow death when Madeline said that about batch cooking on the weekends, I hear you because that's me too. And the times when I do it, I eat a lot better and I feel a lot better. So just shout out to anybody who resists like cooking on the weekends. Madeline Lauf, if people want to know more about you, your company, what do they do?
Yes, please visit us at beginhealth.com. We have a large constipation support community online on Facebook, Kids Constipation Support. And we're really just here to educate and share more about what are those substitutions that you should make or how to support a healthy gut after a round of antibiotics. And if you're wanting to learn more, please come visit us on our socials too, at begin.health.
Thank you so much for being here. This was a treat. Thank you.
Thank you.